Hi everyone, in this Lightroom tutorial video I'm going to show you how I create mood in a wildlife photograph. I've just released an artistic and moody Lightroom preset pack relating to the techniques I show in this video, so follow the link in the description below if you're interested in picking that up. I'll also share a 33% off discount code somewhere in this video, so make sure to follow along for that. So what makes a moody photograph? Moody usually means the image evokes a certain emotion in the viewer. The image could be a bit darker, subdued, or desaturated. It could be something which has a lot of atmosphere, or something a bit unusual relating to the use of color. I have 3 images to show you. The first I'll show you the full edit, and the next 2 I'll use my new preset pack to show you how easy it is to get good results quickly. So the first image I'm going to show you today is of this lion. The image is very bright, but I want to add a nice dark mood to the image. So the first thing I'll do is I will darken the image using the exposure slider. Then I'll raise the blacks to soften those shadows. Drop the exposure down a bit more. And then add in a little bit of whites for the contrast in the highlights. And now I will tweak the white balance. I'm going to go for something a little bit cooler and something around about there to start with. I'll adjust the tint. So something like that, that's before and after. Next thing I'll do is add some presence. So the clarity slider will be adjusted here. And then what I might do is I'll like to soften the image a little bit with some negative dehaze. That adds a nice atmosphere to the image. The next thing I'm going to do is move into the HSL panel. And I'm going to change the color of this green and desaturate the green and these blues here. The greens I might make a little bit brown, and the yellows as well, making sure not to affect the line too much there. The line is looking pretty good using that orange slider there. There's a lot of orange in the line. And then I'm going to desaturate the greens to get rid of that color. Desaturate some of the yellows, not too much because the line has got a bit of yellow there. Desaturate the aqua, and especially the blue. That's full saturation on the blue, so I'm going to get rid of that. And some purples, and also the magenta there. So that's a quick look at what we've done in the HSL. We've just taken away some of that color just to make the image a bit more subdued in terms of the color palette. It's going to bring the exposure down a bit more. Add in a little bit of contrast there, and then up the shadows a bit. Maybe some more whites. I'm noticing this section on the leg is getting very bright here, so I'm just going to create a quick radial gradient just on that small area there, and just to drop down that exposure. I don't want that area to draw any attention, so I'll just drop down the exposure there. And then I want to increase the exposure slightly on the face, just very subtle, just creating a radial gradient and popping it over the face there. So the next thing I want to do is create a light bleed mask. Now what that's going to do is create the effect of light coming in from the side of the frame. I've got 2 here on my preset pack. I've got a hazy light bleed and a clean light bleed. The clean light bleed is basically just adding light without the hazy effect, and then the hazy light bleed is the increased exposure with the haze effect. I like using the hazy one more because it adds some nice atmosphere into the image. So I've clicked on this hazy light bleed, going to zoom out, then I'm going to come up here into the mask, and you can see the mask has been created up there. So you can click and drag this around. You can adjust the size of it. I'm going to put it in the top left-hand corner. Something to remember when you're adding this light bleed effect is to make sure it's coming from the correct angle. The light is coming from the left-hand side on this image. You don't want to add it coming in from the right-hand side because physically that's not possible. So that's looking good there, and you can now adjust all of these sliders. You can increase the effect amount, or you can just come into these effects separately and adjust them according to your taste. Add in some more haze, you can warm it up. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. So now here's the image without the light bleed effect and with it there. Now obviously you can see this is now affecting the animal as well. So I don't want that light bleed to affect the animal. I just want it to affect the background. So what I'll do is I'll choose this hazy light bleed mask here, click subtract, and say select subject. Now Lightroom will take away the subject from that light bleed effect, and it'll just be affecting the background there. So you can see everything in red is being affected and it's not touching the line at all. So that's before and that's after with that light bleed effect. So now I will come down into the color grading, add some blue into the shadows. Not too much, maybe just darken those shadows a little bit there. Then maybe add some warmth into the highlights. Play around with these sliders here a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Just want to warm this up very slightly and then darken it a little bit there. Add in some more contrast. Now I'm liking the image, looking very artistic, but the eyes are looking a little bit flat on the line there. So I'm going to zoom into 200%. Actually, let's make it 300. So on the eyes, you can see there's an area of the eye reflecting the horizon or the sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the brightness of just that area there. That's a nice way to add some life to the eye. So just taking a small paintbrush, painting over just that section. And then I'm going to come down to the exposure, adjust exposure a bit, and then the whites as well. You can see this is before and after. It's adding some nice contrast in the eyes there without the need to actually brighten the eye completely. So the last thing I want to do is add a vignette to darken the edges of the frame. And a vignette is a very good tool to use to help create the mood in the photograph. And then what I might just do here is increase the exposure on this light bleed slightly, just to give that more appearance on the left hand side there. So this is the before image and this is the after. So for this next image and the third one, I'm going to use the preset pack that I created just to show you how easy it is to create moody images very quickly. So to start off with, I'll hover over these different presets. You can see they're creating a lot of different types of styles. So I think number 2 looks pretty good. I like the color palette. It's a bit contrasty, but I can now come into these sliders and just adjust accordingly. Some of that exposure there. I think I want to soften the highlights and the whites a bit. Soften that up a bit there with the shadows and the black slider. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to add that light bleed effect onto the right-hand side of the image. That's where the light is coming from. So I'm going to click on this hazy light bleed mask. Click the mask there, just zoom out so I can place it properly. Probably something like that. And I'm going to increase the amount quite a bit here. Probably increase the exposure somewhat. Maybe making this a bit bigger. Somewhere about there. Let's just zoom in. Maybe add in some more negative dehaze. And maybe some contrast just to counteract that haze a little bit, just to fine tune it. I like the color of that light bleed there. And what I think I'm going to do now is darken the top and the bottom just to emphasize that light a bit more. So sometimes creating shadow helps emphasize the light that's already there. So a linear gradient over the top, drop that down there. Maybe cool down the white balance a little bit. Maybe that's too much. And then the same again with the bottom. Linear gradient over the grass there, just below the animal, just to darken it down a little bit there. So that's looking pretty good. I'll just add in a little bit more whites to up the highlight contrast and then drop the exposure a little bit there. And that's about it for this image. This is the before and that is the after. So for the third image, this one here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hover over the artistic and moody presets here and choose one that looks like a good starting point. Actually, I think number 5 looks pretty good. I like the drab appearance to the colors. Just going to tweak some of these sliders. And then what I want to do next is add the hazy light bleed effect. I'm going to zoom out. Go to my masks, and then click and drag the mask to the top. The light bleed effect works better on wider scenes more than very tightly composed images. So I think on this example it works really well. You can see that's a before and after. We've created some nice effect on the lighting there. So just come in again. I want to cool it down very little bit because we warmed up the background. Just some more contrast. And then come into the effects panel. There's already a vignette applied, but I'm going to adjust it even darker. Just want to tweak the colors a bit here on the vibrance, and maybe on this white balance on the tint. And then maybe push the blues a little bit more on the color grading. So that is a before and after. There are other ways to evoke an emotion in the viewer, so check out this video next and learn new Lightroom techniques to create something a bit more dark and dramatic.